Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about forms in Liferay DXP. So let's go ahead and get started. So in Liferay, we have a widget that allows us to create forms. We can use this form for a number of different reasons, mainly to be able to gather feedback from our end users. We can create forms by going to the site administration section, heading over to content and data, and then the forms heading over there. Since this is within the site administration, we can create forms at a per site basis, or if you want a form made available to all of our sites, you can create it over at the global context. So a way to gather feedback from our end users. One of the common questions that comes about is, what's the difference between forms and dynamic data lists? Let's go ahead and talk about them. Both of them have a very similar feature functionality, right? To be able to collect data from our end users by filling out a number of different fields. But let's start talking about some of the differences. But let's start talking about when would we use one over the other. So with dynamic data lists, we typically only use them as a way for users to enter data and having that data displayed back over to our end user. So maybe you're creating an event or trying to figure out who's bringing what to a potluck. You can use a dynamic data list to not only gather that information, but display it back to our end users. So that way you can see what data has already been entered. If you need to style the appearance of either the data being displayed or the form itself, this is when you would use a dynamic data list as well. And finally, if you need to have some additional things like geolocation, for example, this is another instance in which we would use a dynamic data list. Otherwise, if our use case doesn't call for one of those, then we can go ahead and use the form widget. Now, when we're creating a form, right, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to build out. A lot of it is drag and drop, taking the specific fields that we want or need within a form, dragging it onto the palette, and then going from there. We can have any number of pages that we want, so it's pretty flexible depending on whatever it is that we need to do. So when we're creating the form, we have a number of different fields that we can work with. Here on the slide, we have a number of the fields that you can use in order to create the form that best fits your use case. So some of the ones that I'll highlight here is the paragraph, allows us to have a robust text field with the title that goes with it. You have a date selector, and you also have an upload field as well. So if you need to gather specific files from your end users, you can use that upload feature. So sometimes if we're creating a form, there might be a set number of fields that might appear in many different forms. So what we can do is create what's known as an element set. An element set, simply put, is just a collection of fields that we can use throughout the different forms that we create, so thus making them reusable. So we can create those element fields from the site administration section, content data, forms, element sets, and then go from there, picking and choosing which fields you want for the forms that you're going to create. There are also a number of different rules that you can apply when you're creating the form. You can do things like if a specific field is filled out, you can have an additional. One typical use case could be something like, do you have additional feedback? If the user selects yes, then you can show a box to ask for additional comments. So you have a lot of different rules to set those kinds of conditions up. If this, then that. Do this when something occurs, and so on. A success page. Right. So once the form has been filled out, we want to be able to give a message back over to our end user. This is where the success page comes in handy. You can create a static page that lets our end users know you have finished the form, your data has been submitted successfully, and so on. So success page just allows us to let the end user know that everything worked as intended. Now, all of that is to say this is how you're able to create a form. Of course, the next question is, once you create the form, how do we display that form to our end users in order to fill out? This is where the form widget comes into play. Within our widget section, you can then find the form widget, add it to a page, select the form that you created to be displayed through the widget on the page. From there, once the users fill out the form, you can then go into the site administration section and then see the results. So quick knowledge check here, feel free to pause the video, and once you're ready, go ahead and hit play. Some of the highlights here. So content teams can build forms by clicking and dragging field elements from a list of options in the Forms editor. The form widget can be used to add a form to a page. Again, this is how we display the form to our end user so that they can fill it out. Form entries can be viewed by going through the options menu of any form. Form rules enable further form customization. A success page can be added to the end of a form. So that wraps it up for this video, and I will see you in the next video.